Okay, let's go back to this photographer's portfolio and put in some hide and reveal functionality. So we've done the multi-object on the landscape page. So we have all these 4 photos and they can be triggered by these buttons. Then we have this one where every time we click on an image, it shows us which one we're on and how many there are. And if you remember last week, we got in trouble with this because when you group the image and the solid red box, it covers up the forward and back arrows. So even though you can see them, they're underneath in a layer. So you got to make sure that that layer is at the very top. Let's take a look at the functionality of multi-state real quick before we move on. Here you can see that on landscape, we're just flipping back and forth. And it will just go on and on. It's looped to keep going between the images, but you don't know how many images are there or which one you're on. How far along are you? So that's why we did this one where we put these bars. So every image has a solid bar grouped with it. And then when you get to that image, that way you get a sense of how many images there are and how many you've seen so far. So now today we're going to do one more technique for putting a lot of content on just one page. So we have our portfolio, the landscape, architecture, and animals. And instead of those buttons taking you to one image after another, they're actually going to show all the images for that category. So the first thing we have to do is have a landing page. So a landing page is what will be on this page before you start pushing these 3 buttons. Because otherwise, when you go there, you'll get to this page and it would look like that. And then you click on landscape and images would come up and architecture and animals. But when you arrive there, there's nothing. So let's put that landing page on there. Now the other thing we have to do is I've got all of these images on layers. These are all the hide and reveal images. And I highly recommend putting them on different layers like this because they're right on top of each other and they can be difficult to deal with. So let me show you how that's done. Everything on the right that we want to show, we have to turn into just a button. And we have to name it well. So this is our landing page, so we will just call it that. And there's no action of this. There's an option of hiding it until it's triggered, but this is the one image we're not going to do that on because we want this to be up when you arrive on this page. So now I'm going to go to layers. I'm going to hide that landing page and I'm going to reveal one of these at a time. So this is the animals and I have all 4 images, and you can see too that all of these images are stacked right on top of each other, so you get a really clean transition. They're not jumping back and forth. And the way you do that is you grab them all, eliminate the background, and go to your align objects and make sure that it's centered vertically and horizontally. You'll find that under object and layout. So once I have those, let's go back to getting rid of and just seeing one at a time. So this is our architectural page, architecture. So I'll turn this into a button that's called that, architecture. But it's not just architecture, it's architecture images, because there's also an architectural button. Now there is no OK button on the buttons and panels forms, which is ironic, but you do have to hit return. Otherwise that name won't stick. So now let's go back to layers, turn that one off, turn on the next one, which is the landscape group. And let's make that into a button and call it landscape images. Remember that. And this one we do want hidden until triggered. Unlike the landing page, we don't want this to show until a button has been clicked on. Okay, let's get rid of that. And let's go back and check our architectural images button and make sure that we didn't. Make sure that that's hidden until triggered. Those are the kind of things that'll mess you up. Go back to our labor. So we have architect images, landscape, and the last one that we need to do is the animals. So we'll make a button. We'll call it animal images. Hit return. This is also hidden until triggered. But we do not want this to show until a button has been pressed. Okay, so let's look at our layers and make sure we've named everything. Architecture images, landscape images, animal images. Now we'll make those all visible. And now it's time to make the buttons that are going to trigger those things. So let's first go to landscape. We're going to make that a button. and we're going to call it landscape button. And what that's going to do is this, and that's what this is all about. It's going to hide and reveal certain things. So when landscape is pressed, we don't want to see that landing page. So we'll click to an eye with a line through it. We also don't want to see the architectural images, and we don't want to see the animal images. The landscape images we want to see, so we'll put an eye. Now the buttons you can just leave as an X, it doesn't matter. What you don't want to show is the eye with a line through it, and what you want to show is the landscape images with the eyeball. And all of these would be unchecked. You do not have these hidden. They need to be sitting there at all times. So let's go to architecture, make that into a button, call this architecture button, and the action is show and hide, at which time it shows us everything. We want to hide the landing page. We want to reveal the architecture images, hide the landscape images, and hide the animal images. The landscape button, we're just going to leave it as it is. We do want rollovers on this, which I neglected to do with the other one. Let's make a rollover. These should all be the same as what you're doing throughout your book or your PDF. Let me go back and put that on landscape. And the last button that we have to do is animals. We'll turn that into a button, call it animals button. And we want to hide architecture, hide landscape, show animals, and hide the landing page. And then we want to give it a rollover state. You always want to do a rollover on these because otherwise someone might not know that it's a button until they hover over it. So a rollover state is always a good idea. All right, so let's do a preview. These sometimes have to be kind of, you got to go back in and make sure that everything's that you're supposed to be hiding. So I can already see that my portfolio landing page is not showing. So I got to fix that. Landscape looks good. Architecture looks good. And animals looks good. So all I got to do is find out what's going on with that landing page. So let me turn off the images. Oh, well, that answered the question. I didn't have the layer. So when you're making these layers invisible, just remember in the end you got to make them all visible. So let's try it again. There's our landing page, landscape, architectural, and animals. So you can see how useful this could be. All of this portfolio is stored onto this one page, and someone can flip between them. So hide and reveal is actually a really great trick for these.